just out having fun, and it turns out that, sharing, I don't know, apples with people can, whatever it is. There was this period early on, it was probably before you guys were reading the newspapers, early on in the AIDS crisis, people were saying things like, sharing a toilet seat can get you AIDS, sharing a toothbrush can get you, it's just like, oh, please, relax, it's not that bad, So say you find out your P goes up a little bit from 0, and you're like, nah, I don't mind that much, okay? But as I get increasingly bad news, I get increasingly large doses of additional disutility from that, right? That's what this is saying. So that's what I'm characterizing that as really dislikes bad news. What I really mean is that they increasingly dislike additional bad news the more bad news they've already had. Okay? Okay, and information loving is just the opposite, right? So let me just do the same thing. If P is 1, that's bad news. P is 0, sorry, P is 1, that's good news, 0, bad news. And I can draw this same, I can draw it. There's that. We're pretending P is 0.5. Here, this is how the person feels about just not getting the test and not knowing. And this is how they feel about getting the test. That's this piece right here. Okay, and again, what does this mean? This is the person who, here's them believing that there's no risk in their behavior at all. And somebody tells them, oh, it turns out that bobbing for apples actually has a risk, and you have a risk of if you bob for apples in the same barrel of water, you could get HIV. And you suddenly think, oh my gosh, my probability of having HIV just went from 0 to 0.001. And that first increment of worry is like what really knocks you over the head. But once you're down here thinking, you know what, I'm pretty confident that I have HIV because I've been, bobbing for a lot more than apples, let's say. And you're going to tell me just a little bit more likelihood? I don't care about that. Okay, it's the first little bit of doubt that I care about most, not the last little bit. That's what, in this model, is tipping the balance between somebody who doesn't want to get the test, who's over here, and somebody who does want to get the test, who's over there. Okay? Let me say this about, go ahead. No, and then I couldn't Tiago correct me because I was launching into this thing backwards. So your marginal, in the first graph, right, bad news is going that way on both of them. And so initially your marginal disutility from bad news is pretty small, but then as you get more and more bad news, you get increasingly crazy about the bad news. So that's increasing marginal disutility of bad news is how you could characterize that. And this one is decreasing marginal disutility of bad news. Yes, Daniel? So could I characterize the first person as optimistic and the second person as pessimistic? Tell me the story. Oops, sorry, wrong button. The more certain you are. So if you... Yeah. Oh, so if you only have a small chance of being positive and you're an optimist, then you just say, I don't care about that. So this has some of the flavor of like, what do you do with small probabilities? Do you overweight and underweight, and maybe just ignore it? It could be capturing some of the same psychology. That's something I have to think about more. I don't want to try to think on my feet. You guys already know I'm really bad at that. Okay, so this is, yeah. Well, that's a little bit some of the flavor of what Daniel was just saying. Is there something going on with people overweighting and underweighting probabilities? One of the things that's a problem when you try to model psychology mathematically is you start finding that, well, it's also one of the problems if you try to study psychology at all, is you find that there's like 15 different things that have been published, like we've discovered the blah, blah, blah effect, and somebody else over here is like, we've discovered the blah, blah, blah prime effect. And if you're an economist, you look at these things and you try to write them down mathematically and you say, guys, you guys discovered the same effect. And then you start to look at some of this stuff and it's like, I think that there's probably a strong link between the overweighting small probabilities and the certainty effect and this anticipatory utility stuff, right? Why do I overweight small probabilities? Because I worry about them a lot. I worry about them excessively. I don't have to worry about things if I know the probability is 0. And you start to get into this situation where the psychology could be represented various different ways mathematically and could be thought of in various different ways, and it becomes almost not helpful anymore to tease these things apart. That's my somewhat cowardly answer. I guess if I were more bold, I would say, no, eventually we'll know exactly what's overweighting and what's just anticipatory. And I think the truth is that the human brain is more of a stew pot than that. It would be like going into a stew pot and saying, let's get all the carrots over here and all the little chunks of beef over there. Okay, new section of the course, or new subsection. So, yeah, Wanjiku.
Previous slide, the information mapping, that person would rather be standing at the door waiting for the information as opposed to
So what this person is saying is, standing at the door of the testing center, I'm feeling better about the fact that I decided to get the test than if I had decided not to come to this testing center at all and just walked off not knowing. So they might feel better or worse after the test. They're either going to feel better or worse manifestly. They're going to go from 50-50 to either good news or bad news, but they're feeling better about confronting that possibility than walking away from it. Facing the truth is what this person's doing. Okay, so we've been talking about time since the first midterm, and we're going to keep talking about time until the second midterm, which is not this Thursday or the next one, but the one after. Sorry, we're going to be talking time this week, and then next week we're going to be talking about public policy. But the second exam is going to be mostly around intertemporal stuff. And what we're doing now, so far, we have consistently assumed, as standard economics always does, that the instantaneous utility function is the same in every period, right? So in the reading that you did a couple weeks ago, Frederick et al., they talk about the stationarity assumption. And I just want to sort of show, I'll just kind of sort of jam together a whole bunch of stuff in one little bit of math. So you can think about what we've done so far as being, preferences over plans, plans P. So far we've represented it as some instantaneous utility function evaluated over the outcomes that you're going to get in the immediate period, plus some crazy present bias preference discount factor applied to the sum over all future periods, the capital T, which might be infinity, of something like delta to the T times 1 plus alpha to the T times that same instantaneous utility function evaluated over the outcomes you're going to get at time T. Okay? So what we've done is, the main thing we've done is to introduce time inconsistent discounting. But, and here's the patient discounting, but also the sort of extra delta plus the alpha, which is allowing us to incorporate the utility you're going to get from future outcomes into today's instantaneous utility function, right? So in some sense, we've got each of these periods involves the instantaneous utility you're going to get over outcomes for real when those outcomes actually happen, plus delta times alpha t times, or delta to the t times alpha t times that instantaneous utility in each period that you get to anticipate it. So we've already jammed some funky stuff into the instantaneous utility function. But the one thing we haven't done yet is we haven't allowed the actual shape of your preferences over outcomes, right? This actual, sort of what we call u dot, just the function itself, leaving aside the arguments of what's inside of it. We're holding that constant so far. We're saying however you feel about, bananas versus apples today is how you're going to feel about bananas versus apples next week. So that thing is stationary over time. That's the stationary assumption. We're going to take a look at that assumption, and we're going to see that in fact, it's certainly not true. Obviously, it's not true. What we're going to see is that in fact, standard economics has addressed this issue already decades ago, but they did it in a messed up way. Okay, so here's three different dimensions over which preferences clearly do change over time. Okay, short-term fluctuations, and there's a lot of this, and there's a lot of psychological research into this. So changes in physiological state, such as hunger or craving, which just change all the time for lots of different reasons. Some of which have to do with our behavior, and some of which don't. Right? You're going to be more hungry if you don't eat. But craving, when does that arise? Maybe it has nothing to do with your actions. Maybe someone just drives by in a van which has a billboard on the side that happens to be advertising something that triggers a craving in you. So I wanted to say some things about. Yeah. So how you feel your preferences over hunger versus food, for example, or what type of food you like best. We know this changes. When I'm really hungry, I crave carbs and fat. And when I'm not, I'm perfectly happy with baby carrots. And then I eat them anyway when I'm hungry because I know that that's what's going to be best for me. Craving is there's a lot of things that go into craving. We can talk about drug addiction, and we will. I'll just touch on Dan Ariely, who's that goofy guy with the B antenna that you saw in the first day of class. Has done some really crazy research about bringing men into a lab and then getting them sexually aroused, and then seeing how their preferences change. It's really scary stuff. Then we could talk about your psychological state. People's preferences change a lot when they're depressed, right? People just want virtually nothing when they're depressed sometimes, other than to sit on the couch. What about when you're in a state of road rage? How do you feel about the trade-off between vengeance and time in jail? Most of the time, I would be willing to give up enormous amounts of vengeance to get no time in jail, right? But I have done wildly insane things in a state of road rage. Someone cuts me off, and it's like, I don't care if they execute me, if they hang me from the nearest lamppost, I'm going to get this bastard. Changes in circumstances may have nothing to do with your internal state whatsoever. When it's raining, I have a strong preference for an umbrella. That's the dumb example. Obviously, when it's cold, I'm willing to pay more on a cold day for someone to give me a jacket than on a warm day. These are sort of silly kinds of examples. The thing that I'm personally have always been really fascinated by is how you can get yourself into circumstances without really intending to, that will then change your preferences in a way that keep you in those circumstances. Okay, so for example, I have noticed over and over again myself that if I take on a big work project and I get myself down on campus all the time in my office working and around other people who are busy and they're working and I'm getting rewards, oh, look how hard Dan's working, my preferences start to shift towards, I just want to work all the time. I don't care about going dancing, I don't care about going for hikes, I don't care about spending time with my friends. And I can become, in terms of my preferences, I'm doing what I choose to do, but in terms of my happiness level, right, it's going into a huge hole. And then if I can just break myself away from that, just say, sorry, I made a mistake, I'm not going to do this, and then go home and spend a few days relaxing, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's right, I really like going for hikes. I really like going out dancing. Okay? And so there's this I think, very fascinating question of like sort of what happens if your preferences change in different circumstances, but you have some control over what circumstances you wind up in, but then once you're in those circumstances, your preferences shift in such a way that you can get stuck in those circumstances. Okay. Then there's a category, and I don't claim that this is an exhaustive list, but there are various different kinds of long-term systematic changes. One of the ones that I think is most fascinating and has been looked at the most in economics is sort of the question of habit formation, some part of which is addiction, but not all, and acquired tastes, which is kind of very similar to habit formation. There's the paper that I'm going to refer to at the bottom of this slide, or in the next slide, builds a model of classical music preferences and how classical music, like a lot of things, is sort of an acquired taste. Once you've spent quite a lot of time listening to classical music, it's true of certain kinds of jazz as well, you start to enjoy them more. Your preferences shift, and all of a sudden you wouldn't be caught dead listening to anything as crass as, say, Gilbert and Sullivan. And it's the same with wine, whatever. It's happening to me with tea. I'm getting to the point where, don't give me Lipton. I can't tolerate it. And that's very similar in a lot of ways to sort of questions of habit formation. Well, if I go to the gym regularly for a while, I will begin to like it. It will become easier. My body will expect the exercise. I'll get used to having the endorphins, and I'll want to go, and I'll keep going. Or the same thing with cigarettes, with crack cocaine, with watching television, whatever else. And then there are just long-term changes that unfold naturally as a function of time. Right? Most people's preference, most male humans have their preference for risk decreases over time. I'm not exactly sure if that's true for women as for men, but physical activity, all kinds of things change as you get older. All kinds of preferences change. And then there's a third category, which, it's not necessarily exactly distinct from the second category, but it's worth separating out as a separate category because it has particularly important implications, which is the sort of long-term process of getting used to a new reference point. Well, maybe long-term, short-term, but this adaptation, we'll typically think of it in terms of a reference dependence model where, having a mug is one state of the world and then, not having a mug is another, or, making $50,000 a year is one state of the world and making $100,000 is another, and you're going to adapt to these things, and your reference point is going to shift from one to the other, and that's going to change what we think of as your preferences. Okay, so all these, and there's, the range of different possibilities is endless, right? You can think of so many different ways that our preferences change. And so there's this extremely famous paper from 1977 by Stigler and Becker. This is the Becker, Gary Becker from the University of Chicago, and Joseph Stigler, who I think is emeritus by now, unless he's dead. And they solved this problem. And that paper is on DSpace, not required. It's really one of the great classics of neoclassical economics. First of all, it is psychology and economics. It puts an enormous amount of psychological realism into economics. It's an absolute tour de force of mathematical modeling, and it is completely free of economic content. It is completely vacuous in its actual meaning because it puts so much inside a black box and just says, this is what goes on inside the human brain. We can explain anything now. But it has absolutely no predictive power whatsoever. It's like a Fabergé egg of economic modeling. And basically what they do is they say, look, whatever's changing, you're going from hungry to not hungry, aroused to not aroused, young to old, whatever it is, we're just going to say you're going from, there's some state variable, and you're going from one value of that state variable to another, young to old, hungry to not hungry, whatever you want to call that. We're just going to give you a state variable, and they started out by using a sort of capital accumulation model from macroeconomics, and they said the state variable is sort of like how much capital you've accumulated, but we can call anything how hungry you are. It doesn't matter. And then we're just going to define your instantaneous utility as a function of your consumption and what state you're in. Okay? And then that's going to allow us to make the assumption that if we hold your state constant, your preferences will be rational and stable. Now, they didn't then go out and prove that that's true, but you can just define the state as specifically as you need to get people's preferences to look rational, right? If you're exactly this hungry, you will feel exactly this way about the trade-off between baby carrots and potato skins. Okay? And if you are that hungry, you will feel differently. But as long as you're always, anytime we find you exactly this hungry, we're going to assume that you have exactly the same preferences over food choices and how much you're willing to pay for food. Okay? So here's the example, mugs and money. And this, by the way, is Lydia Ashton creation. She actually did the graph for the solutions to problem set 1. And she's not here for us to applaud to, but thank you very much, Lydia. And basically, we start out by defining preferences over mugs and money, depending on the reference point, by just sort of cramming all of these different variables into the utility function and saying your utility is a function of all those things. Okay? And we wind up with situations where if the reference point changes, you may get intersecting indifference curves, which we know are non-rational. Big problem. It means that you have preference reversals. Your rank ordering of things has changed, right, from one reference point to another. Okay? So what's going on in Stigler and Becker, this paper is called De Gustibus non est disputandum, which is Latin for there's no arguing with tastes, or what they reinterpreted as something like it's a bad idea to argue about other people's tastes, or it's a bad idea for us to, whatever, you read the paper, you'll see what they mean by it. But it's referred to as De Gustibus. So what they do in De Gustibus is instead of just throwing all these things into this instantaneous utility function together, like a kitchen sink, we're going to define the reference point as a state variable, and we're going to define preferences over consumption conditional on that state being the same, and we're going to say conditional on the state being the same, preferences will turn out to be rational, right? So this indifference curve here, this is generated by some instantaneous utility function u of C1, C2, given R1, R2, sorry, I don't put in the real numbers, given a reference point of 3, 100, if you recall. And this one here is generated by u of C1, C2, given 496. And basically what we're saying is, these are two different utility functions now, right? This is the utility function of a person who has a reference point of 3, 100, and this is the utility function of a person whose reference point is 496. And psychologically, they're two different people. They have state-dependent preferences, and if you go back to that problem set in a different graph, what you'll see is that, true enough, as long as the reference point stays 3, 100, you can move the person to different levels of utility and map out their indifference curves, and they don't intersect. Okay, so we've sort of we've taken what Stigler and Becker did was they took a sort of infinite mountain of hopelessly complicated psychology and physiology and a lot of other things, and they just said, we're ignoring this. This does not bother us. Our assumption is not that your preferences, that your rank ordering over choices is the same all the time under all circumstances wherever you go. That's ridiculous. That's stupid. That's an invalid criticism of standard economics. What we're saying is that ceteris paribus, holding everything else constant, your rank ordering will stay the same and be consistent and rational and complete and transitive and fine. Okay? And you can imagine that this would be true. This is reasonable, right? Conditional on your state of hunger, your preferences over food and money might be stable. So it seems reasonable to assume. This is the standard thing that standard economists do. It seems reasonable, or if you're a British standard economist, you say it seems not unreasonable to assume the conditional on your state of hunger, your preferences over food and money are stable. The conditional on your age, your preferences over risk are stable. The conditional on how long you've been going to the gym, your preferences over exercise are stable. The conditional on your reference point, your preferences over goods and money are stable. And you can just go on and on and on. Conditional on whether your preferences over umbrellas are stable, etc. Right? And then you can interact these states and say, you know what? If it's raining and I'm super hungry and I've got to get to the store and get some food, I don't care about the umbrella. It's like, okay, well, conditional on the rain and your hunger state, your preferences are constant. Okay, so Stigler and Becker basically have rescued rationality of preferences. They're just basically saying huge mountains of cases where people would say, oh no, there's all kinds of reversals. You can see all kinds of preference reversals. They just said, yeah, that's because people's states are changing. So hold their states constant and we get our rationality back. The problem, this is not a problem for psychology. This is psychology. This is what I was saying earlier in the semester. Psychology and economics isn't really such a great name. This is psychology and economics. This is already psychology and economics. It's not behavioral economics for the following reason. That in addition to rescuing rationality of preferences, they chose to make the assumption of rational expectations. Okay? That people correctly predict these state-dependent changes in their preferences. So for example, I'm hungry now, but I know that I won't want all this junk food once I've eaten, so I'll buy the correct food now to maximize my utility later on. Okay, so we'll look at that in a second. I want a tattoo now, but I know that later in life I will not want a tattoo, so I'll make tattoo decisions that maximize my lifetime tattoo utility, right? I'll get it on like somewhere that doesn't show. I hate the gym now, but I know if I just keep going, I'll wind up hating it less, so I'll go to the gym now in order to benefit from developing a habit later. I'm excited by this new fill-in-the-blank shiny object, but I know that my preferences will adapt. I'll get used to the shiny object, so I won't waste my money on shiny objects whose novelty wears off. Which, by the way, I feel fairly confident is what's actually keeping our economy afloat. It's what I call shiny object bias. If instead people fail to predict state-dependent changes in their preferences, then A, the Stigler-Becker model,